Today is the GIS Career Panel as part of the Brown Geography Awareness Week in partnership with the Rhode Island Geographic Information System. And I just wanted to start off by letting everyone know that we are doing this as a Mentimeter. So if you want to follow along, you can by either scanning the QR code or going to menti.com and entering the passcode of 85827301. This will allow you to follow along with the slides at home or on your own, as well as interact with a couple of the slides that we have prepared. My name is Garth Hoxsie Quinn. I am the Supervising GIS Specialist within the Rhode Island Division of Statewide Planning, and I am also the Rhode Island Geographic Information System Coordinator, and I will be your moderator this morning for this panel. And so I'm going to start with introduction. So Geography Awareness Week, GIS Career Panel. Sorry, I got ahead of myself on the slides. That might happen often. And what I would like to start with any of our audience members or even our panelists, if they are entered into the Menti, what are you currently majoring in, or what do you do for work? And I see that we have 6 participants online potentially, so. Teaching is the winner. I'm also aware that it is still relatively early in the morning, and I know that the Brown students have their midterms this week. Next week's Thanksgiving, so we have teaching and coordinating, both of which this group that's up here will be able to probably talk to quite well. So moving along. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to briefly introduce themselves. They're going to talk about what sector that they work in, whether it's private, local, state government, nonprofit, what their current role is, how they use GIS, and what geospatial technologies they regularly use. And I'm going to start with Ethan here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Garth. And before I start, I will invite people to come up if you want. We can use this opportunity to just have more of a close-in conversation if you want. You don't have to. My name is Ethan McIntosh. I work in state government. I work for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, but my office is a shared service with the MBTA. So a lot of my work is actually focused on public transportation, but we do also support the rest of MassDOT, including highways, rail, aeronautics. I am a senior data analyst, I work in an office where we're doing a lot of data processing. None of us have GIS in our title, but there's a lot of geospatial sort of analysis involved, and the GIS comes in handy. So the main way I use GIS is in, like I said, data processing, transformations, to either generate reports, dashboards, numbers, maps that are useful for informing efforts to improve transportation outcomes in Massachusetts. So specific technologies, it's usually spatial libraries in programming languages, such as SF and R, GeoPandas, and sort of Python scripting that integrates with QGIS or ArcGIS. And then a lot of like spatial SQL in sort of DuckDB or Postgres. That is kind of my bread and butter, and then sometimes using desktop GIS software as well for cartography and exploratory analysis. I'll pass it on to Kristin.
Hello, good morning. My name is Kristin Meseck. I'm GIS manager at Providence Water. We at Providence Water don't just serve the city of Providence. We are, although technically, if you want to consider us local government, and we are kind of HR-wise managed by the city of Providence, we actually directly serve water to North Providence, Cranston, parts of Smithfield, all of Johnston, and Providence. So we actually serve on a much larger scale than that. What do we use GIS for at Providence Water? Actually, quite a bit. One of the essentially tools that I use is we try to create a digital twin. We try to go ahead and map everything that we have underground so that we can know exactly where things are. If anything goes wrong, we're able to manage that situation. I have a team of GIS specialists that we go ahead and update anything that happens in the field. We do about a couple $1 million worth of water main work a year in either the distribution system or the transmission system. All of those updates that happen, they need to get updated in GIS. I also do some water modeling, depending on if we're doing some main extensions to the system, if we're taking over another municipality and adding it to the system. All of those things are part of what GIS does at Providence Water on a daily basis. Some of the technology that we use, we are an Esri shop. We have an Esri enterprise license, so we're pretty married to Esri. We also just kind of moved to their utility network, which is their new product for doing all kinds of tracing and things like that. So if ever a contaminant gets in the system, we're able to see how far it goes, where it's going to go. If there's a main break, we're able to see what valves we need to isolate to go ahead and contain that main break. We also use GPS pretty frequently. We are an Oracle, also Oracle married to, for better or for worse, for database management. And we use Python and R in general to create a bunch of our scripting tools. Over to Aimee.
Hello, I'm Aimee Mandeville. I'm a research associate in the Environmental Data Center. That's the geospatial research lab at the University of Rhode Island. I've been in GIS for 30 years. I started as a psychology major and ended up taking a computer class in environmental, and here I am 30 years later doing this. So our research lab is a grant-funded lab, so that means that all of our money comes from other project calls for GIS work. So we'll get grants funding through NOAA, or local state government will fund us, or other professors at University of Rhode Island who need GIS support. They'll come to us and write us into their work. So we use, I use GIS in a variety of different ways depending on the project. So one project might be all about just database management, getting the data, serving it up on ArcGIS Online for others to use in maps. Specifically, I'm the RIGIS data manager, so I'm in charge of keeping that data in one space, putting it up in rigis.org, and kind of keeping the technology moving so that makes it easy and efficient for others to access that data. I work with Watershed Watch and their project, and I'll talk about that a little later, but a lot of, besides the data management piece, I really enjoy taking the data and making it a visualization, either through apps or other web maps, to then be able to tell the story of why this data is important. And so that's where I really prefer to work. So a lot of the technology I use is, I'm in Pro a lot in ArcGIS Online.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Isaiah Spencer. I am a Brown graduate. Studied geology in the year 2021, and currently I am a GIS specialist at Beta Group Inc. Beta Group Inc. is a engineering consultant firm that works in the private sector, and we do a bunch of different services such as planning, engineering, environmental, landscape, and the field that I'm in is asset management. And so, for me, I'm using ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS, Esri products to help services to clients that are municipalities, towns, or state government, and really trying to help them with, it could be a number of projects. I'm currently working on plow route optimization or climate change resiliency projects. So we're trying to expand and trying to work on, what towns and cities need currently. And so, that's a little bit of, me and where I'm working at right now. And I'll pass on to Cy.
I'm Cy Smith. I'm the Massachusetts State Geospatial Information Officer. I had to look at my notes to be sure I had that right. I am also the MassGIS Director, and I've been there for about 2.5 years. I was the state GIO in Oregon for 21 years before that. I have a team of 23 geospatial professionals that I manage lightly. And are basically what we're about is coordinating all the geospatial activities across the whole ecosystem. So that's state government, municipal government, private sector, nonprofit, anybody who uses the technology. We all ought to be using the same data, basically, the same underlying data anyway, and then putting all of our data on top of that. So we try to coordinate that to reduce duplicated effort, spend less money, do more work, and also support data-driven decision-making. In terms of using GIS, we do all kinds of things, as the folks up here have talked about. We aggregate and update and do QC on parcels and addresses and roads, on trails, on stormwater data, on surface water data, wetlands, all that sort of thing. We create land cover data. We acquire imagery and LiDAR statewide, and we do some application development for geocoding and analytics. We use pretty much all of the Esri suite of products. We have an enterprise license too, so we're fully engaged with them. But we also use QGIS for our web presence, basically. And then we use ERDAS Imagine. We use Oracle RDBMS, and we've started using an AI tool called Black Shark to do a lot of geo AI stuff that I'll probably talk about on one of the other questions.
All right, so moving on to the next slide, anyone who is here and is in the Mentimeter, if you would like to answer the following question. How many of you are familiar with geospatial GIS technologies? There are a variety of answers, as in using them regularly, don't really use them, not familiar, I've heard of them, but don't use them, and then I was told that there would be coffee and donuts. So give that a minute if anyone that's in wants to answer. If not, we'll just move on. We've got at least one person who uses them regularly, so that's good. So, all right, well, we will move on to the next set of questions. And this one, I have broken these out a little bit, so not all the panelists will be answering every single question. So this next one is going to be, if you can briefly describe your GIS career journey. I know for myself, it's interesting. I might have a bit of a parallel to Isaiah. My undergrad was geology. I moved to the state of Maryland, where I did that for a little while for an environmental engineering firm, and then went to go work for the state of Maryland, where I worked in their hydrography program, helping find locations for wells. And that was probably where I first started using GIS. We used it to create tax maps to send out to the well applicants. When I started, they were just doing photocopies, and we started actually building them in GIS so we could print out a nice colored map. When I moved to Portland, Oregon, I worked in the Bureau of Transportation's parking program, and as I was starting, they were transitioning from having a sticky map about the size of this curtain behind me, where they were putting push pins on it for where street closures were occurring, to putting it all into GIS, and then also tagging the permit application into that map. And then I moved home, where I worked for the Rhode Island Department of Health for about 7 years, was working on updating coordinates, the latitude and longitude for a lot of the public water systems infrastructure, so that it could be mapped if need be. And then about 2.5 years ago, I transitioned to my current role within the Rhode Island Division of Statewide Planning, and now I'm here in front of everyone. So I've got two panelists that are also going to be answering this question, and I'm going to start with Kristin, if she could tell us her journey.
Absolutely. So back in 2008, 2009, I didn't know what GIS was. I think a lot of people didn't necessarily. I was an undergraduate for environmental studies and for archaeology double major. And a lot of the people in my program were trying to, find some lab classes to take and things they needed to take, and they were talking about a GIS class. sounded interesting, but the lab for it was Friday afternoons from 1:30 to 4:30, and that sounded awful for a semester. But the more and more I thought about it, it sounded really great. So I bit the bullet and took it, and it was probably one of the best decisions I've made. So I think that's just a really great lesson, and just do it. Just do it. It's fine. It's just a semester, can change your life. So I took that, and then actually liked it so much I took the second course in the spring, also a 1:30 to 4:30 lab on Fridays for a year. So it was a great experience. I decided that this is what I wanted to go into full-time, and I applied to different master's programs. I ended up at San Diego State University and got my master's in GI science, in geography. And then from there, I ended up actually working with one of the postdocs from that program at UC San Diego for looking at the built environment and how it supports where people are physically active in different demographics. So a lot of in retirement communities, some kind of vulnerable communities and things like that. That was a really, really great job and opportunity that I loved, but for personal reasons and also for reasons of, kind of upward job mobility and looking out what's out there, ended up moving back to the East Coast and started working for Providence Water. And here I am now. It's been 9 years this past October, actually, and it's been actually really, really wonderful to grow that division from where it was when I first came, and just have GIS become more of an integral part of the organization, which it was to begin with, but now it's so much more more important there, which has been very, very helpful.
All right, and I'm also going to have Cy Smith talk about his career journey.
So on the train ride from Boston this morning, I was trying to recreate some of this because it's been a long time. So I actually started in the geospatial industry in 1984. For those of you who didn't bring your calculators, that was 41 years, a long time ago. I'm not going to walk you through all that because it would take more time than we have, but just a few sort of points about that. We were doing parcel maps back then. I was leading a small group of folks in a county assessor's office in the Kansas City metro area, and we were using ink on Mylar to create those maps. So that was a lot of fun. I learned all about Leroy lettering sets and all kinds of things that you've never heard of and shouldn't, except in a museum, which I saw in a museum recently, and it was very disturbing. So it's disturbing when you see something that you've used in a museum for other people to see because it doesn't really exist anymore. But I was, and by the way, ArcInfo was introduced in 1982, so 2 years before that. We didn't know anything about that, weren't using it. They'd been using ink on Mylar for decades, and that was what we were doing. I became a GIS consultant in 1988. Didn't know anything about it, but they hired me because I knew about parcel mapping. And that was what they wanted to, they had clients who were using GIS to create parcel maps. This was in Kentucky, so Louisville, Kentucky was, you have to say it that way, Louisville, was creating parcel maps with GIS. So they brought me in to kind of consult with them. It took me 6 months to understand what we were doing. I mean, it just, it was a totally different thing, taking the data and combining it with the maps. That was just like, what? Hold on a minute. But really, that was where it took me maybe 6 months to a year to understand that, the really important aspect of that was you're using the map as a common key. It's not just about parcels, it's about tying all the data to the same map. And the map, the location, is the common key in database terms for everything. So you can aggregate and pull everything into the same space and then use that to see all kinds of things that, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but you can use that to see all kinds of things that you couldn't see and trends and so on. So that was a really sort of a mind-blowing experience back then when I was, 28 years old. And I became the first state geospatial information officer in 1992 in Kansas because as a consultant, I created that position in a strategic plan for the state of Kansas, and they created it, and then I applied for it, and they gave it to me because, it was my idea. So So the last time I worked with the software was ArcView 3.1, which, you know, you've probably, maybe you've heard of, but certainly never used it. It's in a box in a museum now. But that was the last time I really used the software. So, and since then, I've been doing basically coordination work in Oregon for 21 years and now in Massachusetts, a little bit in the private sector here and there.
Thanks. I also wanted to add that when I was in school, my senior year, my geology professors were introducing this great new software, and I remember leaning over to somebody and saying, "This is never going to catch on. It was too complicated, too convoluted, and this is now what I coordinate on a regular basis." So you never know where any road is going to take you. So. So moving on to the next question, this is what is the day-to-day like in your place of work? And so for this one, I'm going to have both Aimee and Isaiah answer, and we'll start with Aimee.
Okay. So I suppose the day-to-day, because I work on a variety of different projects, I've been trying to do better about getting a paper calendar and saying, today is the day that I'm doing this project. Because what ends up happening is you get emails and you get derailed from, and you need what I call think time to, because a lot of we're either trying a new thing and you have to start and be able to finish without getting interrupted. So usually I'll go in the morning, check the email, make sure that the RIGIS data hub is still running. I do a bit of teaching, and so confirm that there's no issues with any of the students, and then get started on, and it'll be just working on whatever particular project that we're trying to get done. And there, of course, are always meetings, but every day is different because of the variety of projects that we work on.
Okay. And Isaiah, if you want to give us an insight to your day-to-day.
For sure. So I usually get into my office 9 a.m. I have about an hour commute. I go over the bridge that's being constructed. So if it weren't for GIS, I probably wouldn't be driving an hour or over the bridge to be going to work. So I get settled in and I start on projects that I have on my plate. So that could look like currently plow route optimization for several cities. Or it could be a climate resiliency project. So I have the flexibility to work on usually whatever, there's obviously deadlines and we're trying to beat those. But I usually have, where I can fit certain goals and certain specific kinds of work depending on the project. So usually I'll meet my manager too for updates here and there. But my favorite part is that every day is different. Some days I'll be going out to see a client and looking to, see what their plow route looks like and what changes they want. So we'll go directly to the client, or we'll have meetings in the office to, see how things are going and what updates need to be made. So that's my favorite part. That every day, could look different, even if it's the same project. Usually there's different work within that project that I like to do. So yeah, that's kind of what my day-to-day would look like.
Nice. Aimee, I'm going to have to steal your idea of the paper calendar, because I can tell you that there are plenty of days where I come into the office and I'm like, oh, I'll start this. And then it's like 1,500 emails. And I'm like, well, I opened the webpage for what I was going to read today. So moving along, the next questions, I'm going to have both Ethan and Kristin answer these ones. And so... Right? Yes. So these are what skills, talents, or qualities are most important for success within like your sector, be it GIS oriented or not. Because as I mentioned, I did not come into my field of work being GIS oriented. It was something that, somebody mentioned it as an idea. We started playing with it, and from that point forward, I actually liked doing GIS. So, but we'll start with Ethan on this one.
Sure. I think what I'll talk about is probably more general than my specific sector, but I think the ability to not just like have the technical understanding and know how to do GIS and data analysis, but the ability to present those sort of analytical findings to non-technical audiences is like so important for success in my role, especially not just like making information more digestible and like available to all the people who need it through, visual hierarchy and emphasizing key takeaways and sort of those kinds of techniques, but also knowing how to tailor a presentation or a memo or just an email to the person that you're talking to and the decisions that they need to make is really important. Usually people don't need to or want to know about the statistical significance of your hotspot analysis but knowing how to take that and communicate it into what they need to know, which is like, how uncertain is this decision that I need to make about where to locate this infrastructure or whatever it is. So that's the skill that I would emphasize as being really important. Even though like technical skills are kind of the most specialized parts of our jobs, being able to communicate and present to non-technical audiences, and many times even your manager is non-technical. They don't know all the weeds and don't need to know all the weeds. So that's what I would emphasize.
All right. Kristin, if you want to.
Sure. Ethan, absolutely. That is 100% a very important skill. I'm just going to kind of piggyback on that a little bit too, which is that in a water utility, obviously we have GIS and we have a GIS division, but most of the people that work in the organization are not GIS people at all or even close. And not saying that in a bad way, that's just not what they do. So the importance of being able to communicate those things is so in a way that's understandable, and the way that they can go ahead and translate that into what they need to do to get you the information that you need, so important. Along with that, it's incredibly, incredibly important to be able to come up with these spatial solutions to support the organization. I think that's probably the biggest thing and the biggest value that GIS is able to bring to the organization. Essentially, highlighting a problem or identifying a problem. Maybe someone brings it to you from the transmission and distribution department. Maybe you just notice that there's a workflow that could operate a lot better than it's operating, and saying, thinking about it, I can have a geospatial solution ready for this problem. And I can be able to present it and be able to get it implemented in the organization. That is a really, really big deal. So kind of thinking about what tools you have available and how you can go ahead and make it work for the company or whichever you're working for, with the idea that, again, it's not a GIS company, but we're able to offer GIS solutions for the work that they do. The other part that I'll just say too is that management experience and skills ended up being way more important than I thought they would be. And that's something that you generally, people don't like teach and learn. A lot of people learn by doing, which isn't really the best way, honestly. It would be better to kind of take some courses or learn some things on that. It's definitely something that's way more challenging than I ever thought it would be, and obviously not a GIS-specific skill whatsoever. But learning about management and managing people and how to also be a good employee for your manager, all of those things are kind of underrated, I would say, in terms of in any organization.
Thank you. I know sometimes for me, the ability also to break away from the norm of like, this is how we're always going to do it, and not being afraid to, open the box, step out of the box, and come at things from different angles has definitely helped me in a lot of the things that I've dealt with over the past 2 years in my role. Moving on to the next set of questions. Next question, this is going to be for both Cy and Isaiah to answer, but what are concrete steps that students can take now to gain an edge when entering careers in geography or GIS? Which one of you wants to go first?
Sure, I can take it. So, you can take a numerous amount of steps, whether it's taking courses at your college that are available, coding or GIS related, or, doing a master's program. For me, what was really helpful was doing an internship. I was lucky enough to be able to do an internship during my either end of junior year or beginning of my senior year at Brown. I was able to do an internship with the Rhode Department of Health. And I was able to, for that semester, work on a flu vaccination site locator and say, hey, where, if a person wants to find the closest pharmacy, what are the times for that? Someone could go in and take a flu shot. What are what are the times where the pharmacy opens in general? So it was very good for me to say, okay, this is what it looks like in the real world to do GIS, and it's really I think it was important for me to also see like what the workspace was, how a GIS manager works, what a GIS analyst works, and those kinds of things. And so for me, it was very important to do an internship, and I think that's very crucial. If you have the opportunity to, I would say go for it for sure. So again, a lot of different steps. I would say the most helpful for me though was doing an internship.
Okay. Well, I agree with that. That was really good. Internships, we budget for 2 internships every year, MassGIS summer interns, and we'll continue to do that, I'm sure. And it's not always the most glamorous work, but it's things that are really important. And if you get into that kind of a situation, a lot of times you're going to have an opportunity to do other things that are not just specifically what the internship was originally designed to do. So there's going to be opportunities. If you're open to that, if you ask about it, you'll probably be able to help work on other things. Another thing that I've found recently that was, I didn't really expect this to be the case, but there was an AI hackathon that MIT did, and in combination with Harvard, and it was on a Sunday. They gathered a bunch of people. They spent 10 hours on this hackathon. They asked us for some ideas about what they could use, problems that could be potentially solved. So we gave them some stuff, pointed them to some data and that kind of thing. Some of the folks who were in that, I've talked to since then because they were doing some really cool stuff with the data and the problem that we gave them. And I've gotten one of them involved in some of our projects now that we're working on. So it's not, it's a volunteer activity. So that was another thing that I would say is probably really useful, volunteering with nonprofits. If you can show that on your resume, that looks really good for people to, for people like me who are looking to hire somebody. If I'm finding somebody who is otherwise a pretty good fit, you've always got a lot of people. So it really kind of depends on who you're up against, really, when you're trying to get hired. But, and there's no, you can't control that. But if you've got a volunteer opportunity that you've participated in with a nonprofit or somebody else, anybody, but another government agency or whatever, I think that's really good. I would say it's really good to have a degree of some kind. It's not necessarily that you have to have, a master's or a PhD or whatever. Sometimes you can be overqualified for certain jobs, so it kind of depends on what you're applying for to kind of fit with that. But on the other hand, we've hired people who we knew were overqualified. The issue there is you are probably going to lose that person. So you kind of try to balance that. This person is going to get something better. They needed a job. We are going to make as good a use as we can of them while they're available to us. But really, it's all about the experience you can get. So whether it's volunteer, whether it's an internship, whatever, if you can get that experience, that is what we're really looking for, somebody that has some work experience in some way. I would say that SQL and Python are really good. These were some examples that Garth had given us. SQL and Python are something that we always look for. AI now is something that is really good, GeoAI. We're using that for feature extraction from aerial imagery and from LiDAR, like buildings and land cover and things like that. We're also using it for code development, just to help, with code development. And we're starting to use it we're starting to use agentic AI so that we're kind of moving toward the idea of answers as a service. Being able to type in just a normal language question and having the tool go out and hit all the data sets that you've given it access to and that you've trained it on to find the answer for something that, where you're saying, oh, well, show me all the parks within a certain distance of this location that have these 5 different features. And you might have to, the tool might have to hit, 6 or 7 different data sets in order to pull all that together and then show you a map and give you the answer. And you've just asked, the question that is in pretty normal language. So that's kind of a cool new thing. And then I would just, I guess the last thing is about application development. We sometimes look for people who know how to do the front end part of the application where you're showing, this is what the user is going to see, and other times it's the back end features, and those are different tools that you use for that. So front end and back end of application development is good stuff to get experience in.
Thank you to you both. So the next question is if you can discuss a challenging or interesting GIS project that you've worked on or are currently working on. So for this one, I have both Aimee and Ethan giving us some information, and we will start with Ethan on this.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so the project I want to talk about is something that I've been working on and off sort of for the past year or two, offering support for the MBTA's bus network redesign. This is a plan that was passed back in 2021, which basically amounts to a massive expansion of bus service and also redrawing lots of bus routes to better serve sort of the travel patterns of the 21st century. But it was not really intended or funded to be implemented all at once. So the decision that the agency is always asking ourselves is like, if we have X amount of money to hire a certain number of bus operators, which pieces of this larger plan should we prioritize rolling out first to have the most benefit for the riders? And one of the criteria that sort of we decided to use to help make those decisions, and that I supported sort of generating information for, is this idea of coverage. So how many residents of the MBTA service area would gain a frequent connection to some important destination if we implemented a given change to a bus route? And the challenging part of this is that the bus network redesign has hundreds of possible route changes. And there are many also key destinations that the service planners are interested in connecting people to. So the existing tools that we had for analyzing these kinds of questions, we actually had a already built out in ArcGIS Pro Python script for doing this kind of walkshed analysis, taking the transit service that exists, looking at the bus stops, and then calculating what are the road and street segments that people are in a walking distance to a given bus stop, and then overlaying demographic data from the U.S. Census to estimate what portion of the population lives within that walking distance. So we had this walkshed analysis, but it's, network analysis takes some computational time. And we were not going to run this tool hundreds or thousands of times for different combinations of possible route changes. So what I developed was first there was a SQL script to basically simulate for a given route change, what would the network of transit stops look like after that. And then there was a Python component sort of iterating through all the different possible route changes, and then collecting basically for each stop in the network, which service scenarios, which route changes would this stop be able to connect someone to Longwood Medical Area or to the airport or to other key destinations. By doing all of that work up front, you can then feed a list of stops into this walkshed analysis, run it once, intersect all of the walkshed areas with each other to identify sort of subsegments of street that are covered by different stops, and then you only need to run that tool once, and you have every combination of possible route changes sort of mapped out. And the impact of that is that now with a reasonable amount of compute time, we can tell our service planners, hey, if we do this route change on, and I'm making up stuff, if we change Route 28 to end here instead of over there, an additional 10,000 residents of the service area will be able to have a frequent connection to Longwood Medical Area. And maybe we also say, that includes 5,000 residents of color and 2,000 low-income households. So those are the kinds of statistics we were able to deliver to that team for hundreds of route packages to help them decide between which ones we should implement first in the rollout of the Better Bus Network at MBTA.
Thank you, Ethan. Aimee, if you could give your...
Sure. So this project I'll highlight is, it's kind of my pet project. I get paid a little bit on it, but it's similar to what Kristin was saying. I saw there's a watershed watch group at URI that's been collecting water quality data over the past 30 years. And the process was that the monitors go out, they fill out do their measurements, fill out a card, send it to URI. URI receives the card. The students type in the data in an Excel sheet, and that process, it might take many months before that one monitoring day gets accepted into Excel, but then the monitors themselves can't see that data yet because there was no way. They would call the Watershed Watch coordinator and ask for the data, and then Elizabeth would have to go into the Excel sheet and download it. So we started small where we could take that monitor card and make it a Survey 123 application. At the very least, that's then just already in, and we can make that available in ArcGIS Online and the Hub, and the monitors could go in and look at their data as soon as they've entered it. And so that was sort of our first foray into seeing if this is something that would work, and it did. And so then we said, okay, let's take the data that we're getting for the year, upload it into Arc Online, and then automatically generate some dashboards. And so that worked out well, everyone liked that, and you're able to download the data. And so now our next steps are to make the one Excel sheet, which I was saying takes several minutes to open now. So it's 30 years of data of all these parameters in this one Excel sheet. And so we've now moved that into SDE, and the idea is to use Experience Builder and be able to access all that data, and you can go to the one monitoring location and pull the data for over the 30 years, but then also generate graphs so that each year we're just adding new data, and it's all happening automatically without having to generate each of these different output types. So that's sort of my pet project.
Thanks, Aimee. So anyone who has been working in this industry for even as little as I've been in this industry, we all know that changes in technology can really throw our day into turmoil. I don't know if any of you realized yesterday morning that there was a global outage because of the Cloudflare incident, and sometimes you start walking around talking to people, and this is what you feel like inside your head. You look like Charlie Day when he's talking about the, I can't remember the whole thing of it, but this whole conspiracy theory. But anyways, this is also how sometimes it feels when you're trying to talk to non-GIS folk about GIS in general. But on this one, if you can discuss a challenge you have faced in working with GIS technology and how you overcame it. And for this one, I have both Aimee and Isaiah talking about this, so we'll start with Aimee.
Okay, sure. So I think there's not one particular challenge. I think the challenge, GIS is the challenge, where you'll see something presented in a presentation, or you've watched a video or read an article, and it's like, oh, that sounds so great. So then you go and try and implement it, and it's not quite as easy because the data they used in the presentation has been created in such a way that it is just click the button. So then, similar to like the Watershed Watch data, it's perfect but not, where you have a field that has numbers in it, but it's actually a text field, and you can't create a chart on that. So those sorts of things. And so being able to know where to go to find some help in that, using the Esri help is fine, going to the GeoNet, which is now Community. But I've been using ChatGPT and Claude to just ask the question, and so then it just gives me the nice bullet list to be able to try. And so I think being able to troubleshoot in looking at all these other resources, and of course talking to other people in your group to say, have you ever run into this? And they might say, oh yeah, it's this, just do that. So.
Thanks. Isaiah?
Yes, for me, so this is going to be similar to what Ethan was saying with his project. I had to learn Network Analyst and specifically the route tool as well on the fly for one of my projects. So it was for a climate resilient project that I mentioned before for the town of Yarmouth, Massachusetts. And so what we were trying to do is help the town with their fire department, police, EMS to say, okay, certain flood scenarios are going to happen in the future. How can we look at routes that are, the fire department, police station, et cetera, are going to use already, and how are these floods going to affect them, and where do we need to, raise the roads or do these other things to help EMS and firefighters get to local citizens or people getting to the hospital. So I had never used Network Analyst. I never used it in school. I never used it in my project at Rhode. So I had to kind of learn on the fly. So, I would sometimes just see, okay, well, how does the tool work with, a little bit of data? I would look up videos. I would do some research. And, I would try to see who else had used Network Analyst, who else would use these tools so that, because, if you're, you may not be know a specific area, even if you're in a specific job you have. So I think it's important to be open and to ask people, hey, like I need help. And so that's what I did. And then also, I'm sure my colleagues here could say that there's going to be potentially errors that you could run across. And you have to have patience, and you have to be a problem solver and say, okay, like this is what's in front of me. How can I work through this and kind of fix this? So that's one thing for me that was a challenge. And I think those are some of the ways in which I've been able to work on that challenge, and I think others can do as well moving forward.
And I just want to say one of my favorite things that's always ever come up is when I've gone to map things and they don't show up in Rhode Island, and I can't figure out where they went, and when I zoom to them, they show up in what's commonly referred to as Null Island because people put the wrong, they've usually either inverted the coordinates or just haven't been paying attention. Sometimes it's a really simple fix, but sometimes you're doing that simple fix for a couple hundred layers of data. So, but I appreciate those answers because they're both very much what people deal with on a regular basis. And this pretty much brings us to the last question of the day, and that's, if your office were hiring, what would you look for, like, in an ideal candidate? I've got both Cy, Ethan, and Kristin answering this one, but I know Cy has a meeting that starts in like 10 minutes, so if he wants to give his brief response on this one.
Sure. This was kind of a difficult one because I had to think about, you get so many people that apply for jobs, and you're looking at lots of resumes, and you can make your resume look great. There's ChatGPT will write a great resume for you. But the key is, how you do in an interview. And people get nervous in interviews. I mean, it's just that's a normal thing. What I try to do in an interview process is I try to make it a conversation instead of, we ask you these rote questions. Unfortunately, in government, they like you to ask these rote questions, and they want you to ask the same question of everybody that comes before you because that's fair, So that's a challenge, but really a conversation works better. And what I'm looking for is humor. A sense of humor is good. A smile. I see a big smile back there. That's always great. and I've interviewed people who never smiled at all, and I would say something that I thought was enormously funny, and they and they wouldn't smile, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it wasn't that funny, but you still should have smiled, pretend like it was funny. But I mean, seriously, that's something you're looking for because, they're going to fit in well. It's just you're going to be able to get along with that person. They don't have to laugh at everything I say, but, a smile's good. And creativity, finding a way to show, your creativity. So when you come into an interview, you're going to come in with some things that you want to talk about, that you want to tell. And if you can do that in a way that shows, your creativity, then that's going to be really good, I think, for people to be able to see that you didn't, the things that you've done, yeah, you were given this assignment, but you were able to turn it into something more, or you were able to solve a problem in a creative way that maybe they, weren't looking for or whatever. So anything like that. And then the last thing is really sense of purpose. I have to tell this story. This person will never know that I told it because she doesn't know that I'm going to talk about her. But this young woman that lives in my apartment building, she's got a marine biology degree, and she's working for a company doing, watching the animals that they're testing. She's working for Lilly, and they're doing animal testing. And so she's taking care of the animals and making sure that they're well cared for and all that kind of thing. Not what she got her degree for. She doesn't like the job. She's looking for other things. And so I've been kind of talking to her about how you find something else. And one of the things that we talked about recently was this idea of sense of purpose, that what do you really want to do? What's your, what do you want to do with your life? And she said, I don't really care about that. I just want to find a job. And I'm like, okay. You really need to see, something more in what you're doing. No matter what the job is, there's something important about that job. But regardless, you need to be talking about what your sense of purpose is, I think. If you're going into an interview, that's a really important thing. And that's going to put you above some other folks who really are just there to get, a job. I mean, everybody wants a job, that's why you're interviewing. But being able to show in some way when you're talking about what you want to do, and that's a question that you're going to get asked in a lot of interviews. Well, where do you see your career going? What's the next 5 years look like for you, and that kind of thing. How you answer that can show a sense of purpose or not. And this technology is so amazing because it touches everything. Everything. That's the whole idea of using location as the common key. So there's all kinds of opportunity to talk about sense of purpose in an interview. So I think that's really important.
Thank you, Cy. I'm going to move on to Kristin.
So absolutely, all of those things are excellent, especially sense of purpose. I'll just add to that, like, you want to see a little passion. You want to see that this is what someone really wants to do. And I'm not saying that you have to go into that interview and be like, this is my whole life, I want this. But there needs to be a little bit of a spark there, I think, to really set someone apart that this is something that you have a good level of interest in. We actually started doing about 5 years ago, we started doing a technical assessment along with the interview, which I think has actually been very successful in kind of making sure that candidates have some kind of literacy with, geospatial literacy. Most people do very well on it, but it kind of separates out people who are very good at interviewing and maybe not so actually good at the actual technical aspects of the job. So I would just say be prepared that might be part of what you apply for when you go ahead and interview with the job. Usually we always say ahead of time that there's a technical part of it, a technical assessment. What we look for the most, I would say, is that we do a lot of promoting from within and hiring from within. And while that's really great for the people who work at the organization, that sometimes can leave us a little, I don't want to say stagnant, but a little stuck in some certain ways. And we're definitely always looking for like fresh perspectives and kind of latest and greatest in terms of what's out there, the work you've been doing, and how you can kind of bring that experience to the organization and kind of help us to become a little more cutting edge with things. So definitely fresh perspective is a pretty strong thing, and then that sense of purpose and kind of spark, I would say.
Should have used the word authentic in combination with sense of purpose. It's not just a matter of, making something up that you think is going to sound good, but it needs to be authentic. So you have to think about that before you, get into an interview, because you've got an opportunity to show that usually in one or two of the questions that you get asked.
Thank you. And then we're going to round it out with Ethan.
Yeah, sure. This is an interesting question for me because I'm still pretty early in my career. Like most of my experience has been as an interviewee, but recently I've been on interview panels and like seen what it's like, and seen the we're a state agency, we have to score people by like how well they answered each question in that sort of rote way that I was talking about. But in terms of what we look for, definitely like applied experience with at least one technical tool, such as GIS software or business intelligence software, and with at least one programming language, whether it's SQL and sort of database management or scripting, R and Python. That kind of technical experience is kind of a baseline requirement for probably even getting an interview. But then I agree that the interview is really where there's an opportunity to stand out. One way that I think people stand out is if they have good sort of business and policy communication skills. So, being able to make the leap from here's my GIS or data output to like here is what I would recommend from a policy perspective or from a business perspective based on that, and demonstrating that in the interview. And then I agree, a sense of purpose is very important. And I would say specifically for the like domain or business area that you're applying for. On the one hand, GIS is great because it's applicable to so many fields and sort of missions. But being able to demonstrate for the job that you're applying for that you both care about that area, whether it's for me transportation, and that you can either from past experience or from personal knowledge be able to speak to the sort of business and policy questions of that area. It makes a difference in helping to stand out, because then the hiring manager knows that you'll be able to sort of anticipate the kinds of questions and things that people are interested in doing in that specific industry. So.
Thank you, everyone. I also kind of want to add, it's a little in the lines of like with what Sai was talking about, but if you're able to show a little bit of your creative side in the interview process, or if during the process they ask for a portfolio. I know Sai has been in many conversations with me where I will just throw out, it's not always a solution, it might be a creative problem, but just being able to not be afraid to put something out there that's not for the norm. And if you can showcase something like that when you're going through an interview process, it's usually fairly helpful. A couple years ago, I interviewed with USDOT, and a couple of the things that they asked for were a portfolio, which at the time I only had stuff from school. But the other thing that they did was they gave everyone a question of, we have this giant wall in a room, what kind of map would you put on it? And so it was kind of an interesting thought process for USDOT to be saying, like, how would you set up the secretary's office, essentially? Like, what would you do? And I kind of my whole thing was like, growth of the highway system across the country. But I appreciate everyone who is able to attend. I appreciate the panelists who are here. Anyone who is in the Mentimeter still or remote, they can always ask additional questions. And I saw this pop up on it might have been LinkedIn earlier this week, because it is Geography Awareness Week. And, I love Calvin and Hobbes. So, we're studying geography. Now, what's the state you live in? Denial. Yep, I suppose that can't argue there. So, thank you, everyone, for attending, and hope that everyone learned something. Any questions? Yes.
Well, I think this was amazing. This was amazing, and I'm sure it will be useful for a lot of students who are thinking GIS-related careers. And as an educator, it's also beneficial because I have lots of questions from students, and seeing whatever the skills that we're already teaching is meaningful for the sector, or like what they might need more to advance. When Ethan was talking about the uncertainty, which my whole research is built on, I would like to just extend on that. Like, you mentioned that, like, we need to be communicating that, or some of the decision makers might need to just know this information. But I'm curious, like, how they are really into learning that too. Like, do they really care about that? That's my question.
About uncertainty?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important because, I'll try to give an example here. Like, the MBTA has many different sources of ridership data, and the quality and like reliability of the ridership data for, let's say, the commuter rail is very different from, or the green line is very different from even like the red line or the orange line in terms of how confident we are in the trend over time, how confident we are in like the number of fare taps being equal to the number of people who actually got on. And so being able to distinguish between that, and instead of just running an analysis and presenting a number to someone about, let's say, the effects of a service closure on ridership and how that should inform how we plan future service diversions. Like, I think it's very important for some of those sort of people in fare policy and sort of agency leadership to know that not just that, you know, here's our best estimate, but what's the sort of range or uncertainty around that. It can be a very low amount of uncertainty if it's using data that we're very confident in because of how it's collected, or it can be a very high range of uncertainty, and that can inform what decision they make. So that's, I hope I answered most of your question there, but.
Any other questions in-house?
Hello, thank you so much for sharing about all your experiences. It was such a privilege to hear about all your career paths. Mine is a more time-related question. I know it was the second or third one where Kristin and I discussed how earlier, like sub 2010, you guys didn't really have a lot of GIS areas to get experience in or like know about. So what do you think the future of GIS looks like continuing forward? Do you think it'll keep evolving in a more like productive manner? What areas do you think it'll go into?
Do you want to start with that one, Kristin?
Oh, yeah, 'cause he's not here. Sure, that's a great question. I wish I had a crystal ball for it because it's definitely it's moving fast, especially since I feel like there's been a bit of an explosion. I feel like I run into people way more often now that know what GIS is, have at least heard of it, and many people I know I just run into that have used it in some way, or work with someone who uses it. So that's been fantastic. Going forward, one issue I do keep coming up against within recent years is that I feel that a lot of the companies that are supporting some of the GIS technologies we use are on this continual push to move to latest and greatest, And while I understand the push behind that from an industry standpoint and a user, it's becoming very difficult to maintain our business practices with a constantly evolving infrastructure for GIS. So that has been a bit of a challenge, and I do foresee that hitting some kind of a loggerhead with, essentially industry and users saying, you need to slow down with some of this because we can't go ahead and tell employees that we're yet again changing the way we're doing these things. So I'm not sure how well that's going to go or not going to go in the future. That's one kind of issue I foresee. Otherwise, I do think this is a growing industry. I do think that there are plenty more places that GIS can go, and we're you know, not just getting started, but there's plenty more aspects to expand upon.
And I just want to add to that also. I know for a lot of us, like, so RIGIS started largely as environmental. It was to help DEM, statewide planning, and I believe Department of Transportation find a better spot for the central landfill, only to find out the central landfill was the best spot for the central landfill. So go figure. But we're starting to see, like, for a number of years, like a lot of it, like, so Cy's office, he is the GIO. In a lot of states that have those offices, they're located within the IT programs, because everyone always looks at this as software and IT. But there's now a huge push with GIS moving into planning. And so you're starting to see it show up in planning. It's being used for so many different things. It's not always just an analysis of this. It's also now 3D modeling of cities. I believe in Colorado, they use it to see how tall buildings will be and see if it'll create a shadow after sun has melted snow in a certain area and cause freezing issues. So it's definitely become a whole environment of its own. It's not just what it was. And even I run into problems where I did my post-baccalaureate certificate in this in 2019, 2020, and everything that I pretty much learned there is already not used. It's out the window. So it is an industry where you're also constantly relearning the workflows or rewriting the workflows. And I agree, Kristin, I think at some point, the constant changing of or updating of the software, it's going to hit a head where we just can't keep up with it. So, does anyone else want to answer that question, or? All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right.
Hello. Thank you so much to the presenters for sharing your wealth of experiences with us. I really appreciated sitting in on the conversation. I was wondering if, to your point, if you folks could talk a little bit more about how you use GIS when collaborating with folks that are doing policy work, policy analysis, and also like urban or city planning.
I can actually start this one off because it's something that Cy and I started 2 years ago. This actually is a much larger region-wide project, and it's kind of where collaboration kind of comes in a little handy. Right now, the USGS is in the process of updating all of their streams. So they're in what's currently called the National Hydrography Data Set, or the NHD. That is all being moved to an elevation-derived hydrography because we now have LiDAR being collected across the country. And so because of certain changes to GIS technology, mostly the ArcGIS Online platforms that are done through Esri, it's allowing us to more easily share our data back and forth with each other to help create this region-wide network that we were able to put in as a, I don't know the best way to describe it. USGS calls it a data collaborative announcement, but it allowed all of the New England states to be like, these are the areas that we want to focus on, and we kind of put them all in for a single project with USGS. But we're only able to really communicate about that with each other because of being able to use ArcGIS Online and send our data back and forth. That stuff won't really result in any policies at this point in time, but that data down the road, because streams will finally have a Z value added to them, will make future policy planning, future planning, flood mapping way more accurate than it currently is. So. Anyone else that deals more with policies?
One example of using GIS to inform policy and you said urban and city planning too, is not something that I worked on directly, but I work with planners as well, transportation and sort of land use planners. And one thing that they recently developed for the state of Massachusetts is a dashboard that essentially is doing a sort of GIS suitability analysis for transit-oriented development. So combining layers on and sort of calculations of where transit is most available, with sort of existing population characteristics and infrastructure characteristics, and some other layers that I'm forgetting, but sort of using the powers of GIS, the magic, to combine those into like a score or index that people in housing policy and transportation policy can look at on a map in sort of beautiful sort of visual format where there are the most opportunities for housing development near public transit. But I'm happy to talk more after too. There's probably many other ways that and kinds of policy that we could talk about. So.
And it does help also with information sharing. I still deal with people where they're getting things handed to them as a PDF map, but then to update that map has way more steps to it versus when it's just, if it's already in GIS, QGIS, any of those, it's so much easier to get that kind of information back out to the policymakers. I know that this has come up recently in a lot of states with the government shutdown and the loss of like SNAP benefits and finding food pantries, and it's just, these things are all on PDFs that were updated 15 years ago. So, but if they're living in a mapped environment, then it's much easier to get those things updated and pushed out to not just the policymakers, but the public. But it would also allow policymakers to know where there aren't food pantries, but there's a population that might need access to those. So, and I know there was another question here on the front row. So she's gonna bring the mic up for you.
I was curious because Kristin mentioned earlier that you got your master's in GIS, and I was wondering if like a master's or a certificate after getting like your bachelor's degree, is that something that is seen as a requirement, or is there more of an emphasis on like real life like experience working on projects?
I think it depends what you're looking to go into career-wise. I definitely wanted to go into industry in some level. Obviously, if you want to go into academia, just going directly to a PhD would probably be the best call. I do feel like master's obviously sets you apart for sure. Certificate programs are great, and having that is also wonderful. If you do have an undergraduate degree in something that's very related, plus the experience as well with GIS, that's also good. I would say the master's definitely sets people apart. I know a geography master's isn't, I guess it's becoming more common, but yeah, I would definitely say master's sets it apart, but definitely not it's not 100% necessary.
And I know, like, so I did the certificate route, and I'm happy I did it. I do wish that I went back. I do wish I had done it as a master's at the time. I wasn't sure how I felt about going back to school, and so I stuck with the certificate program. I think there are things that I missed out on by not going the master's route, because the certificate, like, it's high level, but you definitely get into the weeds on certain things, but there are a lot of like the database management stuff you don't necessarily go into. And I myself am more on the cartographic side, so I like kind of I like taking people's data and finishing the map for them. So, but I think a master's route probably would have been nicer to have done. But you know, it's also one of those things you're constantly learning as you go, so.
I'll add to this question that just for another perspective that I got my first job in, like my first full-time data and GIS job before I had done a master's degree on the basis, so I concentrated in history here at Brown, but because I worked with Frank in the library doing GIS and data work, and I had a little bit of previous data experience, that was enough to get like me in the door for that sort of first full-time, more GIS-focused role. And so I think that for me, that experience was the most important. That being said, I then got a master's in, it's in urban informatics, but there's some GIS pieces to that because I wanted that sort of additional and more in-depth training and on things like database management and statistics and visual design and things like that. So I'd say, especially in job interviews, like even if it's whatever it is, if it's previous work experience or from a master's degree, being able to speak to how you used GIS and data to help solve a problem or make recommendations can sort of give you a leg up for the job search.
All right, any other questions? All right, thanks everyone for our first combination Rigis Brown career panel. It was nice.